Right, so welcome back to part 2 of 3. So we're on a walk around of Solace, not to show you the lake, although it does as well, which is always a bonus, but also to sort of tell you the sort of things I'm looking for and try and impart a little bit of my experience to help you when you turn up at any lake and the sort of things I'm looking for and hoping to find. So we've just left DD's, we've done half the lake, so I thought we'll start again fresh, second part, rather than the video being too long, and see if we can find any other signs. So I'll turn you around. We'll walk along this back bank. Now I know obviously on this lake that there aren't any other swims until up in that back corner there, which is Wallace's that we looked at from the first, but there are little holes. And I'm using stuff I know already about the lake as well as what I'm seeing live to try and piece some things together for you, not just for here, as I say, but for anything. So, you know, first things first, I'm just having a look. I'm looking for bubblers. I mean, this pinprick in here is very different to what we saw in the last swim, at the end of the last part. That is definitely pond skaters and silvers taking pond skaters off the surface. If you look at them, look at that spot long enough when you're standing here with your Polaroids on, you'll realise that you know that's little uns taking pond skaters. So that's my view now. This isn't a swim. This is just a little gap or a stalking gap. Again, you've got the raft all the way through, but a lot less algae here because it's shaded. But also you've got this big snaggy area. Now, as you'll walk round, you'll realise that there aren't any other snags with regard to like overhangs. There's one tree which comes out further, which we'll show you in a bit. But something like that, being such a rarity on this lake, and will be the case in a lot of lakes, that's something to definitely bear in mind. It's also worth bearing in mind that where I'm standing is 70 yards from the inflow swim that we talked about, where I was in the corner, and it's 70 yards if I was looking right to Wallace's. So this is the exact middle between the two swims. As a result, this water out here is kind of like a no man's land. You know, if someone's in the inflow and someone's in Wallace's, this sort of area 10 yards to my left and 10 yards to my right is often neglected, is often left out of sort of principle of not pestering your mate. And as a result, you can almost guarantee they very rarely get fished for out here. So that's something to bear in mind. It will be very similar on a lot of lakes, that there'll be like a Bermuda Triangle where they don't see a huge amount of pressure. So as I say, this snag here is interesting. I've caught numerous fish out from underneath this bush, even in the winter when this fish is very hard. But I also caught the big Lynn earlier in the year in March from here. As I say, very rarely will this get fished, this area here. So that's something to bear in mind on any lake. There are little viewing points, and you can obviously push your way through all sorts of spots. But you can obviously see they don't get, this is the bankside foliage, they don't get bugged here. People aren't walking in and out. So all these little spots, I'm just having a look for whether I can find cloudy water or just any disturbance at all, really. And I'll do this 2-3 times before I committed to somewhere to fish, unless there was an opportunity that I felt I had to get on straight away. So walking up, obviously here, foliage starts to get a little less dense and we can see a bit more. So I want to be more quiet around here, because if they are sitting here, I don't want to spook them. Even things like this. So you can see here, this is obviously being people are walking here, which means that this spot is clearly getting a lot of attention, because we haven't seen that sort of, you'd call it an animal track, but it's not, it's anglers. And this is probably the only real overhang on the lake. So it gets an awful lot of pressure, because people like to cast the stuff. But from my experience, where we've just walked from, so from this tree, people would fish it from Wallace's, which we'll see in a minute. They'll fish to this side of it or onto the front of it, and it will do fish. This bit of margin from the left of the tree up to where we were standing in that little hole, that's more interesting for me, especially for the fish that we don't see very often. Because if it doesn't get fished very much, then that might be where the rare ones are. So that's something I'm thinking about as well. As you can see, apart from the marginal weed, we've got no obvious weed below the surface here. So as I said earlier, straight away I'm thinking this is probably deeper water. The textbooks will always say, "Oh, shallow in the summer, deeper in the winter," and often that can be the case, but it's not a be all and end all. Like anything in carp fishing, there is literally no rule, and these fish are very obviously do what they want to do. So when we first start, you can see the van possibly in the distance there. So that's where we started, on that bank there, looking back at this swim. So you've got a little bit more of this debris on the surface. This is against the wind. Wind hasn't been blowing in this corner. So as a result, you're probably thinking that there's been fish in here and they've been in close, possibly under this raft. As you can see there's no weed. When you've got your polarized on and you're here, you'll see that there's a handful of little weedy towers coming up. But the majority of this water is clear. So it's probably deeper, it's probably siltier. And that has numerous reasons why they would be here, especially at this time of year. If the lake is healthy, the silt, etc. is healthy, then that is where all of their natural food is living, in that silt. So if this is a silty area, which I know it is, but also you can even piece together before you put a lead in the water. This time of year, good sunlight, warm water temperatures, the naturals are absolutely abundant. As you can see, the surface looks like it's raining. That's all the bugs and everything coming off the water beetles that live in the top layers, but also bloodworm and midges, etc., hatching off. And just because what you can see is mainly roach and things attacking those little hatches, you can guarantee the carp are interested in it as well. So they'll probably, the size of these fish, talking about 40s, 50s and 60s, or 60, if they can just bury their heads in it and suck them out the ground rather than chasing individual bugs, they would. So it's unusual to see them, flying around hunting when they're that sort of size. But definitely the amount of flitting on the surface here, the amount of bugs, the fact you've got no weed, straight away I've put that part of the jigsaw in place, that this is somewhere interesting, a bit deeper, better line lay, many more places to put a rig without having to worry about weed. And obviously you've got this margin down your left as well. I'm going past that tree, so I wade underneath it when I fish here, and I fish the other side or much further down towards that little hole. You've also got this cheeky little corner here, and this margin down here, depending on where your mates are and where's fishing where. So I can't see any proper bubbling at the moment. It's a bit late in the day for that. A couple of hours ago, it was like a jacuzzi all over. But it's also important to look at areas from different angles. Just having a different light angle on the water will allow you to see something that you've been looking at for an hour from one side of the lake, that you can't see where you were sitting, but you come and look at exactly the same piece of water from another angle, and because of the light angles and the shadow and everything else, all of a sudden something you've been looking at for hours is fizzing when it wasn't seconds before, just because you can see it better. So yeah, there's a lot. I'm talking a lot, I know I am, but I'm just trying to put into place all the stuff I'm thinking of and looking for when I walk around the lake. So just where that bit of weed on the surface is, there was a bigger ripple for a second, like a little rock in the water, rocking of the water rather than a stone, that would suggest to me that there might have been something a bit bigger than your average roach and stuff there. So again, I'd stand and sit down. You've got a nice bench here. For those that know it, that's the green bench, not so green anymore. It's a nice place to sit and watch the water from a different angle. Yes, we've got a bit of bubbling down here, so we're very easy to sort of see all this flitting out here and think, oh, there's not much, it's not carp. But the more you look at it, you realise there is actually a patch of fizz amongst that as well. And it's just worth, just because they're not there the split second you're looking doesn't mean to say they won't just appear from nowhere and give the game away. So just take your time and have a good look in every peg. I'd probably do 2-3 laps before, maybe a couple of hours sitting and chilling before I made my mind up, especially with my mates and stuff. Make sure everyone's on the same page, and even talk about the water you're going to fish, like where you're thinking of putting rods, so you're not cutting each other off. Because it's all important. I mean, I'm not saying necessarily work as a team, but definitely don't damage each other, each other's chances. So you got this margin here, so where the light is there is the next swim, is the last swim. All this margin here, we've got that lovely raft again, and that other swim is not all the way up to that corner. So you might definitely worth investigating the margin. A lot of people, it's sort of an afterthought to flick one down the edge, but it's the easiest place to find the spot. You can put your waders on and go out there, wander down that margin and try and find, the perfect spot, which you'd struggle to find with a lead or a marker. So now we're facing back opposite so that fish showed out here. That was a swim we were standing in when we saw it on the back of that weed. So again, depending on where your mates are going and where you discuss, I would never go in this swim if someone was in there or in that swim there. I'd want this triangle and everything to my right. I'd want that to one swim, because there's a load of water out here for either that swim or that swim to sort of break it up there. And then obviously Wallace's or this one down here, so they get in this corner. I don't want to cut each other off. So that's what I'm thinking. Even if this was my dream swim and the guy that had first choice picked that one, I wouldn't be going in here, because you're both gonna suffer. Right, that's a back out there. I wonder if we'll be able to see that. Yeah, we will. So you can just, if I keep zoomed in while I talk, just a little back break in the surface every now and then. So there's definitely, there's always attraction out in the weed, always, doesn't matter, what the weather's doing. The weed holds food and it's of interest. So it's hot. They're obviously starting to get hotter. They're coming up in the water. You can see that there's plenty of weed here, but it's a bit sparser, and it gives you access to the back of this weed. And we've got the fountain down to our right, the aerator, which keeps this corner very interesting as well. So that's just, there's thousands of things you can talk about, and hopefully you'll put your own experience into it as well. But fingers crossed, there's a few things there that I've sort of mentioned that maybe you haven't thought about. Yeah, there's a few over there, look. So just in front of the swim, those things just breaking the surface there, just to the left of that weed that's touching the surface. There, you can just see there's some backs breaking the surface. Yeah, so hopefully you've sort of maybe not learned something, but reminded you of a few things, and I've just given you some tips on how to sort of have a really good wander around, polarized glasses on, hat, and fingers crossed you'll put a few of the jigsaw pieces into place.